My father is one of those people, and he's an Egyptian immigrant.
Salam alaikum, my fellow white people. By the grace of Allah and His Prophet, peace be upon him, Allah decrees that we must secure the existence of the kuffar race and the future for their children. Just as the prophet of the Christians was a Jew, the prophet of the white man shall be an Arab. This is a story that, when I look back at it, is almost absurd. I believe it can be summarized pretty well in one single phrase: Arab white nationalist. Kind of like Clayton Bigsby. Braving Ruin probably is more Clayton Bigsby than anything else. He could have just jumped straight out of a Chappelle Show clip, since he literally is the African white nationalist. But that thing he tries to hide wherever he goes, and which he tries his best to mask, the fact that his dad is an Arab refugee to the United States, while he adheres to an ideology that would require him to gas his father, and in the end probably also himself, the fact that this white nationalist is as white as Obama, that is the only interesting thing about him. Everything else about him is boring or just really annoying. His content, if one can even call it that, is utterly boring. In the 8 months that I've been gone, he managed to make a total of 3 videos, while still having his patrons set to monthly payments, meaning he basically got paid for making tweets, and those tweets were mainly him bitching like a teenage girl about bigger YouTubers. And what about his videos? Well, I believe the best example is where he basically watches an Adam Curtis documentary about beignets and propaganda. Yes, his video literally was him just playing that documentary, pausing it every 5 minutes and squealing, "Adam Curtis is wrong here, it's actually the Jews." Some of his videos somehow eerily remind me of the kind of shit you would hear in an old Osama bin Laden video.
What we call liberalism or democracy is probably second only to communism in terms of the human suffering inflicted. And for what? Convenience, instant gratification, inexpensive electronics, the glory of endless foreign intervention and stagnant wages, of spreading freedom to the world, whether they want freedom or not. And just what is freedom? Is it being able to watch comic book movies on demand, getting hooked on prescription narcotics, spending all of your time numb to the world, falling deep into debt for an increasingly worthless college degree, tolerating all manner of behavior as long as it's not hurting anyone, voting to elect leaders who have no connection to you and therefore no reason to care how their decisions will affect your life? Is it the notion that anyone's opinion is just as good as any—
As many of you know, the drama that shut me and others down started because of him. But I believe to get to the bottom of this, to get a deeper understanding of the annoying American suburban teenager stuck in an Arab man's body, we need to turn back the clock more than 8 months. Namely 2 years. Braving Ruin started his YouTube career 2 years ago, not as Braving Ruin, but as Edgy Sphinx. He claimed to be a liberal.
Both Sargon and myself have associated ourselves with the term classical liberal.
And made cringy videos about how Trump is supposedly Batman.
Are you Batman?
I am Batman.
Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns was a controversial interpretation of Batman's character, to say the least. And for a variety of reasons, I think he was making a prediction about where our society was headed.
But then something weird started happening. He started going on rants about how, for example, after the daughter of a German left-wing politician was brutally raped and murdered by a migrant, how all left-wingers deserve to have this done to their children, and how he wished he could bring her back to life so she would just have to endure all of this all over again. He kept pushing people more and more to endorse positions that many found unacceptable, and then someone found his Reddit account in which he brags about how he infiltrated a liberal YouTube community with the intention of subverting it and dragging it into his ideology. What kind of super genius ideological manipulator, what kind of grand political genius, what great leader literally brags about his YouTube spying master plan on Reddit? Le Reddit Master Spy. If you believe that is cringy, here are his Reddit threads trying to explain to his Nazi followers how he is white despite being half Arab.
I'm American, not Canadian, and I'm not Christian per se. Coptic is just part of my heritage. That's only one half. My other half is Anglo-Irish. I understand why some old writers might have an issue with this, but the way I look at it, my white half is the only identity I've ever had in practical terms. I'm always outwardly identified as white. I act white. I have the same values as other white Americans, and the Coptic part of my identity has already been lost. Basically, I see this as much different from being a black-white mulatto or white Hispanic or something like that. I have no out-group conflict with this counter to white, as that's the only group I've ever fit into my country.
Allahu Akbar. Habibi here is white because he believes he is white. But to be fair, you need to have a pretty high racial IQ to understand Arab whiteness. Let's read that part again. I'm always outwardly identified as white. That's Arab English, I guess. I have always outwardly identified as white, I believe is what he's trying to say. I act white. I have the same values as other white Americans. Apparently race is just a social construct. Salam alaikum, and please no bully, and please no gas. However, and this is, as you will see, a theme throughout his online presence, the white Arab is a coward, probably one of the worst cowards out there, and what this coward fears the most, and what he keeps running away from, is responsibility, namely being held to account and having to face the consequences of his own actions. Because he shut down his Edgy Sphinx channel and ran away before people called him out, trying to weasel his way out by claiming that he didn't run away but was threatened off the internet by the ADL. Those Jews at the ADL are probably more scared of him for being an Arab than being a Nazi, to be honest. Obviously, nobody believed that ADL lie, and so he changed his story to,
I just wanted to show that the skeptics are not skeptical. Allahu Akbar.
Either way, this is where the story of Edgy Sphinx ended. But not the story of the white Arab. He spent almost a year messing around with people. Do you remember those streams I did where I tweeted out the invite to talk to any subscriber about anything? He's the reason I can't do them anymore, as he sent his minions to drop people's doxes in my streams. That's another thing about him. He is so much of a pussy that he never attacks people on the internet himself. He always gets others to do his dirty work for him. Those amongst you with longer memories and who have been around longer will remember that even back in his Edgy Sphinx days, he never attacked people directly, but always just happened to re-upload the videos of those who did. The most surprising thing about him, though, is that he was driven off the internet in disgrace for being a liar, and a year later some of the same people who had condemned him before for being dishonest just accepted him back, including myself. And in the end, there's not really much wrong with that if you believe that someone is changing. But the mistake that many made is to assume that everything this proven liar said was completely truthful now. I later found out that some of the people who gave his words so much weight didn't even know that he used to be Edgy Sphinx. They didn't know anything about his backstory, and that is an almost perfect trick that he played. By merely making a new channel, he managed to delete many people's memories of his track record, thereby eluding responsibility, even in case of a return. But let's for now establish a timeline. Let's wind back the clock to December 2017 when all of this started. In December he started all this drama. He revealed that he had placed people in a video research server that I was running, and that he had secretly recorded and screen capped its members' conversations, including myself. He claimed in his accusation that I was running a server gathering the docs of alt-writers, smearing alt-writers, and doxing alt-writers. Of note here, and something that barely anyone noticed, is that he started all this drama. He stood at the center of it, he initiated it, but he himself, curiously, never even made a single video about it. He brought up those accusations against me, but he never himself confronted me with them. Instead, he kept tweeting at those bigger than him to do it for him, to make the videos that he didn't want to make. Shortly after his leaks, my family as well as the families of others were doxed, and my address was released, and I consequently left the internet. A couple of months later, something weird happens. I get a message from a common friend, an offer that Braving Ruin wanted me to see. He offered that he would make a public statement that I had not doxed anyone, but only in exchange for me lying and saying that he had never accused me of doxing anyone. I declined that offer angrily. Even after all this time, he was still too much of a pussy to do his own dirty work for himself, and thought he could get me to do it for him. The white sheikh still believes he can command others around in his white internet caliphate. After that, people gradually started realizing that his accusations against me were not true, and that an Arab white nationalist might not be be the most trustworthy of people. After that I was told by a friend of mine who had listened to the secret recordings Braving Ruin dumped that they contained my address, in form of a secret recording of me ordering a pizza. That he, while falsely accusing me of doxing, had actually doxed me, and that the evidence he posted claiming it proved I was a doxer was actually my dox. Then he himself slipped into my DMs, acting as if we were somehow friends. He claimed that he had never accused me of doxing, which is almost funny at this point. Who would have thought that an Arab white nationalist would believe his own lies? He claimed he only wanted to expose me for smearing alt-righters, which was new to me, so I asked him who I was supposedly smearing, to which he responded that I was smearing Jean-François Garipi with court documents of his that were revealed. The problem with that is, though, that these Jean-François Garipi court documents were first made an issue 3 weeks after the drama around me by Destiny, and I can't travel through time. And then the worst part, he admitted to putting my address out there in his file, but claimed it was my fault that he had put my address out there. Now how does that work? How on earth can he put my address out there and it is somehow my fault? What mystic Middle Eastern magic is at work here to make this my fault? What Arabian white Sharia laws guide his judgments? Well, according to him, he didn't even know what was in the file he published, and it was my fault that my address was in them, because I have some weird duty to him, apparently, to find it and go to him. Now, I guess we can all agree on how stupid that notion is, but the far more important part here, the really bad and telling part, is the first part. He apparently didn't even know what was in the file of secret recordings he dumped. The people who kept pointing at that file claiming that it supposedly contained evidence of doxing, they themselves apparently didn't even know what was in that file. They just put it up, claimed it contained evidence of me doxing people, and they themselves didn't even know what was actually in them. There are really only 2 possibilities here. Either Le White Arab is lying and he maliciously put my address in there, or he is not lying and maliciously lied about what I was doing in my server. I honestly do not know which one of it is, and you can feel free to decide for yourself. After that, Braving Ruin noticed that I would not under any circumstances ever come back to YouTube under his conditions, and that I'd rather never make videos again at all than bow before his demands and lies. So, staying in tune with the customs and traditions of his people, he tried to Allahu Akbar it. He basically tried to flare up the drama again, same way as last time, but trying to get others to do his dirty work for him. First he claimed I was suing Metica, and as he was doing that, he was too dumb to realize that he was being at the butt end of an elaborate troll here. He also didn't realize that unlike back in December, people were now much more skeptical of his claims and took a closer look at his so-called evidence. The evidence he had was that I was supposedly suing Metica in the 13th District of Columbia with a law on online cattle rustling. Do you see what's wrong here? There are only 12 districts of Columbia, and internet cattle rustling. A law on stealing cows on the internet. Do I really need to explain how that is not a thing? Some people, though, were dumb enough to swallow the white Arab white nationalists' lies again. Then he tried something else by claiming he found a social justice warrior doxing server. However, that fell on its face because people looked into the so-called evidence he provided and found that there was no such thing. And then, well, he ran away. Just like 2 years ago, he shut down his social media presence, ran away and lied. His lie being this time that I was about to dox him. However, as mentioned before, I know that that was a lie. At the same time he ran away, one of his friends turned on him, had enough of his dirty games and shenanigans, and that friend of his shared with me all DMs he ever had with Braving Ruin. And I believe that is the reason why he ran off the internet. And it is at this point in the timeline that we have to stop. The DMs I was given fill up holes in the timeline, and as such I believe it is worthwhile going back in time. Back to December, just a few days before he releases the leaks, of which I later found out he probably didn't even know what they contained, and about which he lied by claiming it contained evidence of me doxing people. Just a few days before he published those leaks, just a few days before he started all the drama around me, where he insisted that I was doing all these evil things that he accused me of, this happened. He complained that even though he had people spying on me and secretly recording me for months, he was unable to catch me doing anything wrong. He was unable to catch me doing anything he could call me out for. He was literally complaining that I was doing nothing wrong in my server. What kind of a psychopath complains about people doing nothing wrong? The kind who has nothing else to offer but half-assed drama bullshit. The kind of idiot who is driven by nothing else but an urge to burn someone, no matter by what means and what excuses. That conversation he was having there then started steering into a different direction of him and his conversation partner starting to conclude that if they just reinterpret things here and there and made bigger claims than what was actually there, it might be enough to shut me down. In other words, they were literally talking about just making shit up to fling at me. Then after my drama there is a short break where he doesn't do much besides gloating and bragging to his friends that he managed to get Metica to do his dirty work for him. Then he starts complaining that he only got me off the internet, that he really wanted to get Sargon. Now this is in line with the Sargon derangement syndrome from 2 years ago, when he also used to secretly record Sargon in private conversations and constantly complained about how much he hated Sargon. But complaining was not enough for him. Maybe he could still get Sargon by getting my private messages with him. That's a funny coincidence, because at the same time that he was complaining about that to his friends and plotting about that with his friends, I received messages from his associates trying to threaten me into giving them all private messages I ever had on Skype with other YouTubers, but most importantly, all private messages I ever had with Sargon. After that, we moved on to another point in the timeline, after people started realizing that his accusations against me were untrue, and after I had declined his slimy offer. He realized that I might come back to address this from my point of view, without him being able to influence it. He, however, didn't want me to come back. He really didn't. And this is the point at which his friends started turning on him and coming to me, because he crossed lines that even the people he hangs out with were no longer okay with. Do you remember from the last video how Coach Red Pill wanted to frame me for rape to keep me off YouTube? That was Braving Ruin's idea. Yeah, he even tried to justify it to his friends. It's not necessarily moral, but it is par for the course. It was that moment that his friends had enough of him. Now, Braving Ruin, I'd like to address you here directly, so in the words of your people, Salam alaikum, peace be upon you, inshallah. It's important for you to remember this because it underlines the one thing you have not learned over the last 2 years through all the times that you fucked up and got fucked yourself. Nobody has fucked you over. You fuck yourself with your own actions. When that failed because other YouTubers noticed and were disgusted by it, he started getting confronted by some of his friends over how the doxing accusations themselves were not even true. And the Arab white nationalist did the brave and right thing to do by taking full responsibility and making and who the fuck am I kidding here? No, he tried to throw harmful opinions under the bus and claimed that it was all his fault. His next course of action also didn't help much. When people no longer just noticed that the accusations against me were untrue, but actually started defending me on their streams and videos, he started sending around information on the family members of those defending me, in an attempt to have his sycophants go after their families. That kind of had the opposite effect. In fact, for the people who turned on him and came to me, this was the second big nail in his sarcophagus. Then he ran off YouTube. Now we are back to where I left the timeline, but other things still kept happening which were shown to me by his friends and others since he didn't delete his Discord presence. When he blamed me for driving him off the internet, something funny happened in his server. His sycophant planned to report me to the German authorities for committing a crime against Braving Ruin. Now, which horrendous crime did I commit against Braving Ruin that they wanted to report me for? For being racist to an Arab. Yes, even his cucked white nationalist alt-right followers are aware and have no problem with the fact that their Führer is an Arab. Then later on, when I made my first appearance on YouTube in 7 months on a live stream, he made his final bid to try and keep me off the internet. He directed people towards my parents' address while claiming that it was my address and sent it around. Even worse, he posted that in a server known for having swatters in it, and then had it read by one of his sycophants on the very live stream I was on. Yeah, his last move was to basically send around the information of my family and possibly trying to have my parents swatted. This was the last thing he tried to do to prevent me from making this video. This is one of the bigger ironies in all of this. This entire drama, it hinged on false accusations by him that I was doxing people. No evidence of such was provided by him or others. All those who claimed I was doxing them were proven to be liars or retracted their statements. But during all this time, when he fanned the flames of outrage on the basis of nothing, he was guilty of the very misdeeds he accused others of. But to me personally, the worst thing about it is that he tries to get others to do it for him. He himself doesn't want to face the consequences, so he sends people's family information to others to mess with people's families. There's another thing about this that stands out and which should stand out to you. When the drama happened and people came for my family and the families of others, I for a long time believed that this was not what Braving Ruin had intended. However, this disproves that. It also disproves the alt-right claim that these kinds of actions are done by third-party trolls. No, the alt-right intentionally goes for your family. They just try to hide how they do it. Braving Ruin himself, he only doxes those with low subscriber counts himself. He did that to Sun King, and he did that to Deadly, a server member and friend of mine who confronted him during the drama over the false accusations. I guess Braving Ruin believed nobody would speak on their behalf since they had no large subscriber counts. The last kind of funny thing that Braving Ruin did before he completely disappeared from the internet, or at least this is something that one of his friends showed to us, was to show his new avatar to his friends. Rinse and repeat. He got called out 2 years ago, disappeared, and came back with a new avatar and name. Now he is disappearing again, and in a few months will come back again with a new name and avatar, even though I kind of have a feeling that it might not be this one. And I believe that even the third time around, people will again forget what a dishonest and slimy person he is. More to the point, the alt-right themselves will accept him back in the fold with open arms, because to them, he is not a liability, but a useful tool that can be used like an attack dog for their own profit and gains. As we get closer to the end of this video, there is one more thing I would like to show you that illustrates the white Arabs' dishonesty. As many of you know, after I made 3 videos on the alt-right, I was contacted by a New York Times journalist who interviewed me and some of my server members. Now, this was taken by Braving Ruin, who claimed I was using the New York Times to get rid of alt-right YouTubers, that I was giving doxes of alt-righters to journalists, that I was using the New York Times and supposed journalist connections that I supposedly had as weapons against the alt-right, specifically against alt-right YouTubers. I, however, have said repeatedly that this was not the case. She wanted to talk about biology. She didn't even want to talk with me mainly, but with the biologists I worked with, especially those from the United States. She wanted to write a piece about political responsibilities of scientists. A piece along the lines of when do scientists have the responsibility to come forward and debunk pseudoscience. A look at her publications would have shown that, since there are no articles about any kind of internet shit-flinging nonsense, but articles on the latest scientific advances. She is a science correspondent. She even received the Pulitzer Prize for one of her pieces on genetics. But more importantly, I know that Braving Ruin knows that, and that he lied about what she was doing. How do I know this? Because I know that Braving Ruin had someone secretly record when she interviewed me, and Braving Ruin decided not to publish that recording, since he knew it would destroy his narrative and prove him a liar. Thing is though, throughout the last months, I have gotten my hands on that recording, and I will gladly share it with those who wish to listen to it. There is, however, one very large irony at the end. It's not that people just believe the proven liar. It is not that he just keeps changing his appearance and people swallow it. It is not that his accusations are all lies. It is not that he is guilty of the very crimes he accuses others of. It is not that he sometimes seems to believe his own lies. It is not that he doesn't even know what his own content contains. It is not that he barely made 3 videos in 8. It is not that he is paid by his alt-right followers for making tweets. It is not that he's an Arab white nationalist. It is not that his Nazi followers know he's an Arab and still follow him along. No, the biggest irony throughout all of this to me is that I have his docs. I know his real name and the city he lives in. I have known for over 2 years since he told me himself back when he was still Edgy Sphinx in a Skype call. And throughout all of this, from the shit he pulled 2 years ago, to the shit he pulled 7 months ago, to the shit he pulled between 2 years ago and 7 months ago, to the shit he pulled in the last 8 months, I never released his real name or the city he lived in. I have admittedly felt tempted on occasions, but I know why I don't do it. Because I do what he can't do. I make researched content. Even though if I were to play by his rules, if I were to engage with the tactics he uses and which he accused me of using, I should have done it ages ago. That's the biggest irony. That's the reason I knew he was lying from the start. Because he knows that I don't dox people. And because he knows that I have not doxed him. You see, Edgy, you don't blatantly dox people because you know it is bad optics. And you know it is because that is why you falsely accuse those you want to burn of doing it. So you do it yourself behind the scenes and get others to do it so you won't have to face the backlash of doing it. You don't dox people because the opportunity to get away with it might not be available at that moment. But should the opportunity arise, you jump on it. And you try to get others to do it for you because you are too much of a coward to do it yourself. I don't dox. And I have not doxed you because cowards don't deserve to be martyrs, because you would never get a job again, and because as much as a shithead as you are not worth me straying from what I do. In fact, this video here, this is the last thing you will ever get from me.